Good morning, guys. Today we're going to pick back up with Fahrenheit 451. I just wanted to recap a little bit of where we left off yesterday. We met a couple of characters, including our protagonist. Starts off with Guy Montag, who is a fireman. We learned a little bit yesterday that firemen in this society are a little different. And it was the character Clarisse McClellan, who Montag runs into in the middle of the night on the sidewalk, who tells him a little bit about that. She asks the question, isn't it true that firemen once used to put out fires? So we find out a little bit about the society that they live in, how firemen are a little different than our firemen today, as well as these two characters, some of the differences between them. Clarisse is always asking questions, and her family seems to be a little bit different. I learned a little bit about her uncle and such yesterday. Whereas Montag doesn't seem to think about things like she does, or at least admit to it. It isn't until she asks him the question yesterday, are you happy, that he realizes he's not. And where we left off yesterday, he comes into his house and finds that his wife has potentially overdosed on sleeping pills. So, if you get to the story on page 12, that's where we left off. We're going to pick up with that here. That was right after the jets came flying over the sky, and Montag lifts up the phone to call the emergency hospital. They had this machine. They had two machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra, down and echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poisons accumulated with the years? It fed in silence, with an occasional sound of inner suffocation and blind searching. It had an eye. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optical helmet, gaze into the soul of the person whom he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw, but he did not see what the eye saw. The entire operation was not unlike the digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on, anyway. Shove the bore down, slush up the emptiness, if such a thing could be brought out in a throb of a suction snake. The operator stood smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working too. So what's being described here is this kind of a stomach pump situation. Like this machine is coming, and it's like they send down a tube, and it's pumping out all the in this case, the sleeping pills that Mildred has taken. And it's really described in a negative way, describing a lot about the person that they're sucking the bad part out of. And that's kind of an insight as to what's going on with Mildred, and a little bit about her before we even actually meet her as a character. So here's this operator of this machine smoking a cigarette. Really sanitary. Very nice. A little different in our society. The other machine, operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-stainable reddish-brown coveralls. This machine pumped all of the blood from the body and replaced it with fresh blood in serum. Gotta clean 'em both ways, said the operator, standing over the silent woman. No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang! A couple thousand times, and the brain just gives up, just quits. Stop it, said Montag. I was just saying, said the operator. Are you done? Said Montag. They shut the machines up tight. We're done. His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into the eyes without making them blink or squint. That's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she'll be all right? Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right here in our suitcase here. Can't get her at her now. As I said, you take out the old, put in the new, and you're okay. Neither of you is an MD. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell, the operator's cigarette moved down his lip. We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many starting a few years ago, we had the special machines built. With the optical lens, of course, that was new. The rest is ancient. You don't need an MD case like this. All you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in a half hour. Look, he started for the door. We gotta go. Just had another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here, someone else just jumped off the cap of a pillbox. Call if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a contraceptive in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long. So, again, something else that's a little bit different about their society. A couple things of note in this case. The first one is that this is happening a little often. Right? He mentions that these cases happen a few times a night. 9 or 10 times a night, they're called in to come to someone's house to do stomach pumps. What's up with that? The second thing is that these aren't even like doctors. Just need a couple handymen. These are people who are essentially like, as its way it's described in the book, is like digging a trench. That's not really a positive thing to say either. Like it seems impersonal. And Montag notices. And he's kind of frustrated with these men, but these men have jobs to do. And they actually have to go run off and do something else. They got to call on their ear thimble. Again, another piece of technology here in a 1953 book. Sounds a lot like a Bluetooth radio, right? Bluetooth earpiece. So, anyhow. And the men with the cigarettes in their straight line mouths, the men with the eyes of puff adders, took up their load of machine and tube, and their case of liquid melancholy, and the slow, dark sludge of nameless stuff, and strolled out the door. Montag sank down in a chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he put out his hand to feel the warmness of breath on his palm. Mildred, he said at last. There are too many of us, he thought. There are billions of us, and that's too many. Nobody knows anyone. Strangers come and violate you. Strangers come and cut your heart out. Strangers come and take your blood. Good God, who were those men? I never saw them before in my life. Half an hour passed. The bloodstream in this woman was new, and it seemed to have done a new thing to her. Her cheeks were very pink, and her lips were very fresh and full of color, and they looked soft and relaxed. Someone else's blood there. If only someone else's flesh and brain and memory. If only they could have taken her mind along to the dry cleaners and emptied the pockets and steamed and cleansed it and reblocked it and brought it back in the morning. If only. He got up and put back the drapes and opened the windows wide to let the night air in. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Was it only an hour ago? Clarisse McClellan in the street and him coming in and the dark room and his foot kicking the little crystal bottle? Only an hour? But the world had melted down and sprung up in a new and colorless form. Laughter blew across the moon-colored lawn from the house of Clarisse and her father and mother and the uncle who smiled so quietly and so earnestly. Above all, their laughter was relaxed and hearty and not forced in any way, coming from the house that was so brightly lit this late at night, while all the other houses were kept to themselves in darkness. Montag heard the voices talking, giving, talking, weaving, reweaving, their hypnotic web. Montag moved out through the French windows and crossed the lawn without even thinking of it. He stood outside the talking house in the shadows, thinking he might even tap on their door and whisper, "Let me come in. I won't say anything. I just want to listen. What is it you're saying?" But instead, he stood there, very cold, his face a mask of ice, listening to a man's voice, the uncle, moving along at an easy pace. Well, after all, this is the age of the disposable tissue. You blow your nose on a person, you wad them, flush them away, reach for another, blow, wad, flush. Everyone using everyone else's coattails. How are you supposed to root for the home team when you don't even have the program or know the names? For that matter, what colored jerseys are they wearing as they trot out on the field? Montag moved back to his own house, left the window wide, checked Mildred, tucked the covers about her carefully, and then laid down with the moonlight on his cheekbones, and on the frowning ridges of his brow, the moonlight distilled in each eye to form a silver cataract there. One drop of rain, Clarisse. Another drop, Mildred. A third, the uncle. A fourth, the fire tonight. 1, Clarisse. 2, Mildred. 3, uncle. 4, fire. 1, Mildred. 2, Clarisse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Clarisse, Mildred, uncle, fire, sleeping tablets, men, disposable tissue, coattails, blow, wad, flush, Clarisse, Mildred, uncle, fire, tablets, tissue, blow, wad, flush, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, rain. The storm. The uncle laughing, thunder falling downstairs, the whole world pouring down, the fire gushing up in a volcano, all rushing on down around in a spouting roar and rivering stream toward morning. I don't know anything anymore, he said, and let a sleep lozenge dissolve on his tongue. At 9 in the morning, Mildred's bed was empty. Montag got up quickly, his heart pumping, and ran down the hall and stopped at the kitchen door. Toast popped out of the silver toaster and was seized by a spidery metal hand that drenched it with melted butter. Mildred watched the toast delivered to her plate. She had both ears plugged with electronic bees that were humming the hour away. She looked up suddenly and saw him and nodded. "You all right?" he asked. She was an expert at lip reading from the 10 years of apprenticeship at seashell ear thimbles. She nodded again. She set the toaster clicking away at another piece of bread. Montag sat down. His wife said, "I don't know why I should be so hungry." "I'm hungry." "Last night," he began. "Didn't sleep well. Feel terrible," she said. "God, I'm hungry. I can't figure it." "Last night," he said again. She watched his lips casually. "Well, what about last night?" "Don't you remember?" "What? Do we have like a wild party or something? I feel like I have a hangover. God, I'm hungry. Who was here?" "A few people," he said. "That's what I thought." She chewed her toast. "Sore stomach, but I'm hungry as all get out. Hope I didn't do anything foolish at the party." "No," he said quietly. The toaster spidered out a piece of buttered bread for him. He held it in his hand, feeling obligated. "You don't look so hot yourself," said his wife. So, something of note here. Mildred doesn't have any memory of what happened, or if she does, she's not acknowledging it. She's maybe acting like she doesn't know, or things are blurry and messed up a little bit. Clearly, something has changed in her from the previous day. Some of the symptoms that that Montag was told by the men when they pumped her stomach. But Montag doesn't make a big deal of it. He just kind of lets it go and goes along with this other narrative that she's creating. In the late afternoon, it rained and the entire world was dark gray. He stood in the hall of his house, putting on his badge with the orange salamander burning across it. There's been some mentions here up to this point, too. Just want to stop. There's been some mentions about some of the symbols that are tied to his firefighting, whether it's phoenix, the image of a burning bird. A salamander has been mentioned a couple of times here. So these are just symbols of a fireman that would be on his clothing and stuff. These both have images related to fire. So something else to consider. He stood looking up at the air conditioning vent in the hall for a long time. His wife in the TV parlor paused long enough from reading her script to glance up. "Hey," she said, "the man's thinking." "Yes," he said. "I wanted to talk to you." He paused. "You took all the pills in your bottle last night." "Oh, I wouldn't do that," she said, surprised. The bottle was empty. "I wouldn't do a thing like that. Why would I do a thing like that?" she said. "Maybe you took 2 pills and forgot, and took 2 more and forgot again and took 2 more, and were so dopey you kept right on until you had 30 or 40 of them in you. Heck, she said. What would I want to go and do a silly thing like that for? I don't know, he said. She was quite obviously waiting for him to go. I didn't do that, she said. Never in a billion years. All right, if you say so, he said. That's what the lady said. She turned back to her script. What's on this afternoon? He asked again, tiredly. She didn't look up from the script again. Well, this is a play. It comes on the wall-to-wall circuit in 10 minutes. They mailed me my part this morning. I sent in some box tops. They write the script on one part and is missing. It's a new idea. The homemaker, that's me, is the missing part. And when it comes time for the missing lines, they all look at me out of the three walls and I say the lines. Here, for instance, the man says, what do you think of this whole idea, Helen? And he looks at me sitting here center stage, see? And I say, she paused and ran her finger under a line in the script. I think it's fine. And then they go on with the play until he says, do you agree to that, Helen? And I say, I sure do. Isn't that fun, Guy? He stood in the hall looking at her. It's sure fun, she said. What's the play about? I just told you. There are these people named Bob and Ruth and Helen. Oh. It's really fun. It'll be even more fun when we can afford to have the fourth wall installed. How long you figure before we save up and get the fourth wall torn out and have a fourth wall TV put in? It's only $2,000. That's 1/3 of my yearly pay. It's only $2,000, she replied. And I should think you'd consider me sometimes. If we had a fourth wall, why it'd be just like this room wasn't ours at all, but all kinds of exotic people's rooms. We could do without a few things. We're already doing without a few things to pay for the third wall. It was put in only 2 months ago, remember? Is that all it was? She sat looking at him for a long moment. Well, goodbye, dear. Goodbye, he said. He stopped and turned around. Does it have a happy ending? I haven't read that far. He walked over, read the last page, nodded, folded the script, and handed it back to her. He walked out of the house into the rain. Okay, so something else of note here in terms of this society is the technology is a little, familiar with us. If you notice, there's mention of these wall TVs. And it's there are also references. Parlor walls is what they were mentioned by Clarisse in yesterday's reading. These wall TVs is like, imagine the entire wall is a screen. And his wife is really engaged in these parlor walls and likes watching her programs on it. And she's kind of describing one. And if it sounds like, well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of anything going on. Well, that's what Montag noticed. There's not a whole lot of anything going on in that show that she's currently watching. But it does sound a little bit like some of the TVs that we watch, right? A big, large, flat screen TV, kind of similar to the technology we have. Or even if you think of it this way, of like a projection, like a projector on a wall. Same kind of thing like that. Only in this case, the whole wall is of this TV screen. Okay? So he leaves. The rain was thinning away, and the girl was walking in the center of the sidewalk with her head up and the few drops falling on her face. She smiled when she saw Montag. Hello. He said hello and then said, what are you up to now? I'm still crazy. The rain feels good. I love to walk in it. I don't think I'd like that, he said. You might if you tried. I never have. She licked her lips. Rain even tastes good. What do? Just go around trying everything once? He asked. Sometimes twice. She looked at something in her hand. What have you got there? He said. I guess it's the last of the dandelions this year. I didn't think I'd find one on the lawn this late. Have you ever heard of rubbing it under your chin? Look. She touched her chin with the flower, laughing. Why? Well, if it rubs off, it means I'm in love. Has it? He could hardly do anything else but look. Well, she said. You're yellow under there. Fine. Let's try you now. It won't work for me. Here. Before he could move, she had put the dandelion under his chin. He drew back and she laughed. "Hold still!" She peered under his chin and frowned. "Well?" she said. "What a shame," she said. "You're not in love with anyone." "Yes, I am." "It doesn't show." "I am very much in love." He tried to conjure up a face to fit the words, but there was no face. "I am." "Oh, please, don't look that way." "It's that dandelion," he said. "You've used it all up on yourself, and that's why it won't work for me." "Of course, that must be it." "Oh, now I've upset you. I can see that I have. I'm sorry. I am." She touched his elbow. No, no, he said quickly. "I'm all right. I've got to be going, so say you forgive me. I don't want you to be angry with me." "I'm not angry. Upset, yes. I've got to go see my psychiatrist now. They make me go. I make up things to say. I don't know what he thinks of me. He says I'm a regular onion. I keep him busy peeling away the layers." "I'm inclined to believe you need a psychiatrist," said Montag. "You don't mean that." He took a breath and let it out, and last said, "No, I don't mean that." "The psychiatrist wants to know why I go out and hike around in the forest and watch the birds and collect butterflies. I'll show you my collection someday." "Good." "They want to know what I do with my time. I tell them that sometimes I just sit and think, but I won't tell them what. I've got them running. And sometimes I tell them I like to put my head back like this and let the rain fall in my mouth. It tastes just like wine. Have you ever tried it?" "No, You have forgiven me, haven't you?" "Yes." He thought about it. "Yes, I have. God knows why. You're peculiar. You're aggravating. Yet you're easy to forgive. You say you're 17? Well, next month." "How odd. How strange. And my wife is 30, and yet you seem so much older at times. I can't get over it." "You're peculiar yourself, Mr. Montag. Sometimes I even forget you're a fireman. Now, may I make you angry again?" "Go ahead." "How did it start? How did you get into it? How did you pick your work? And how did you happen to think to take the job that you have? You're not like the others. I've seen a few, I know. When I talk, you look at me. When I said something about the moon, you looked at the moon last night. The others would never do that. The others would walk off and leave me talking or threaten me. No one has time anymore for anyone else. You're one of the few who put up with me. That's why I think it's so strange you're a fireman. It just doesn't seem right for you somehow." He felt his body divide itself into a hotness and a coldness, a softness and a hardness, a trembling and a not trembling, the two halves grinding one upon the other. "You better run off on to your appointment," he said. And she ran off and left him standing there in the rain. Only after a long time did he move, and then, very slowly, as he walked, he tilted his head back in the rain for just a few moments and opened his mouth. Okay, so a couple of things here too. Clarisse notices that something's different about Montag. Montag is a different type of guy than other firemen. Again, we don't know too much about firemen other than obviously they're different than they are in our society today. But there's something that's a little different about Montag, and Clarisse notices that he seems to be more thoughtful or caring of what other people have to say, and that's uncommon in this society. It's something that stands out to her. It's something that he even mentioned when he's at home looking at Mildred, that there's too many of us, and people don't talk, and people don't have anything to say. So they do have some things in common. While they may appear to be very different, Clarisse and Montag have some things in common. Their willingness to kind of talk and listen. For whatever reason, he's totally engaged in the things that Clarisse says and does. And here's this image of him reaching up to taste the rain, like she had mentioned. All right, so a couple of things to note about her. And Clarisse is seeing a psychiatrist. She's being forced to see a psychiatrist because something's wrong with her. You get the idea that maybe there isn't necessarily something wrong with her if she was in our society, but in a society like this one, where people don't interact, talk, and think as much, She's an oddball. Okay. The mechanical hound slept but did not sleep, lived but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel back in a dark corner of the firehouse. The dim light of 1 in the morning, the moonlight from the open sky framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and the copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on bits of ruby glass and on the sensitive capillary hairs of the nylon brush nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, gently, its 8 legs spidered under it on rubber padded paws. Take a look here at this mechanical hound. Think of it how there are dogs in a firehouse, like a Dalmatian, right? This is the dog of the firehouse, but it's a mechanical dog. So notice some of the things in how it's described. It's got like these clicking and humming sounds of like almost like a robot, or like think of like a computer. But it also has 8 legs that spider underneath it. So just pay attention to the description of this hound. It's definitely a unique type of dog. Montag slid down the brass pole. He went out to look at the city, and the clouds had cleared away completely, and he lit a cigarette and came back to bend down and look at the hound. It was like a great bee come home from some field where the honey is full of poison and wildness, of insanity and nightmare, its body crammed with that over-rich nectar, and now it was sleeping the evil out of itself. "Hello," whispered Montag, fascinated as always with the dead beast, the living beast. Nights when the things got dull, which was every night, the men slid down the brass poles and set the ticking combinations of the olfactory system of the hound and let loose rats in the firehouse areaway, sometimes chickens and sometimes cats that would have to be drowned anyway. And there would be betting to see which of the cats or chickens or rats the hound would seize first. The animals were turned loose. 3 seconds later, the game was done. The rat, cat, or chicken caught half across the areaway, gripped by gentling paws, while a 4-inch hollow steel needle plunged down from the proboscis of the hound to inject massive jolts of morphine or procaine. The pawn was then tossed in the incinerator. A new game began. Holy crap. This mechanical hound sounds terrifying. Montag stayed upstairs most nights when this went on. There had been a time or two, years ago, when he had bet with the best of them and lost a week's salary and faced Mildred's insane anger, which showed itself in veins and blotches. But now, nights he lay in his bunk, face turned to the wall, listening to the whoops of laughter below and the piano string scurry of rat feet and the violin squeaking of mice and the great shadowing motion silence of the hound, leaping out like a moth in the raw light, finding, holding its victim, inserting the needle and going back to its kennel to die as if a switch had been turned on. Montag touched the muzzle. The hound growled. Montag jumped back. The hound half rose in its kennel and looked at him with green-blue neon light flickering in its suddenly activated eyebulbs. It growled again, a strange rasping combination of electrical sizzle and frying sound, a scraping of metal, a turning of cogs that seemed rusty and ancient with suspicion. No, boy, said Montag. His heart was pounding. He saw the silver needle extend upon the air, an inch, pull back, extend, pull back. The growl simmered in the beast, and it looked at him. Montag backed up. The hound took a step from the kennel. Montag grabbed the brass pole with one hand. The pole, reacting, slid upward and took him through the ceiling quietly. He stepped off on the half-lit deck of the upper level. He was trembling, and his face was green-white. Below, the hound had sunk back down into its 8 incredible insect legs and was humming to itself again, its multifaceted eyes at peace. Montag stood, letting the fears pass, by the drop hole. Behind him, the 4 men at the card table, under a green-lidded light in the corner, glanced briefly but said nothing. Only the man with the captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix on his hat, at last, curious, his playing cards in his thin hand, talked across the long room. Montag doesn't like me, said Montag. What, the hound? The captain studied his cards. Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide on for it. It follows through. It targets itself, homes itself, and cuts off. It's only copper, wire, storage batteries, and electricity. Montag swallowed. Its calculators can be set to any combination, so many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butterfat and alkaline, right? We all know that. All of those chemical balances and percentages on all of us here in the house are recorded in a master file downstairs. It'd be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory, a touch of amino acids, perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now. It reacted towards me. Hell, said the captain. Irritated, but not completely angry, just enough memory set up by someone so it growled when I touched it. Who would do a thing like that? Asked the captain. You haven't any enemies here, Guy? None that I know of. We'll have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow. This isn't the first time it's threatened me, said Montag. Last month it happened twice. We'll fix it up, don't worry. But Montag did not move, and only stood thinking of the ventilator grill in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, then mightn't they tell the hound? The captain came over to the drop hole and gave Montag a questioning glance. I was just figuring, said Montag. What does the hound think about down there at the nights? Is it coming alive on us, really? It makes me cold. It doesn't think anything we don't want it to think. That's sad, said Montag quietly, because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. What a shame if that's all it can ever know. Beatty snorted gently. Hell, it's a fine bit of craftsmanship. A good rifle can fetch its own target and guarantees the bullseye every time. That's why, said Montag, I wouldn't want to be its next victim. Why? You got a guilty conscience about something? Montag glanced up swiftly. Beatty stood there looking at him steadily with his eyes, while his mouth opened and began to laugh very softly. Ha! Ha! That's a good stopping point right there. All right, so go ahead and look over the questions in the reading guide. Take any notes. Got a couple of characters that you can add some information to in your notes as well. Not just Montag. Obviously, he's changing and shifting, and as well as finding out information about Clarisse. But we found out more about Mildred today. And there's an introduction to Captain Beatty. It's worth adding to your notes as well. All right, we'll see more tomorrow in Fahrenheit.